Utilitarians and the value of human lives. Utilitarianism says that the right thing to do is whatever maximizes utility. What does that entail for a utilitarian when thinking about the value of a human life? Is it a bad thing if a human dies for a utilitarian? The first thing to note is that utilitarians won't take the view that human life is uniquely valuable. Other animal lives will have utility too, and so utilitarians have indeed been at the forefront of movements to raise the ethical standing of animals in the eyes of broader society. So a better way to think about the question is, what do utilitarians think about the value of life in general? And having answered that first question, we can then ask whether there is anything further to be taken into account when it comes to human lives in particular. The second thing to note is that the answer to this question is going to depend crucially upon a number of choices that utilitarians have to make about how to elaborate their theory. First choice is the utilitarian in question a preference utilitarian or a hedonistic utilitarian? The second question, how does a utilitarian regard the value of merely possible lives versus the lives of those who already exist? Well, today I'm just going to focus on that first issue. The second one turns out to be surprisingly tricky, and there's more than I can cover in just one video. So what is hedonistic utilitarianism to start with? A hedonistic utilitarian identifies utility, the thing they think is valuable. They identify utility with pleasurable experiences and the absence of painful experiences. It's pretty obvious that many animals can feel pleasurable and painful experiences. Think about how your dog reacts if you scratch its back or if you step on its tail. So we know that at least some non-humans have utility. Things might be less certain about some animals that are less easy for us to interpret and relate to. Do fish feel pain? Jellyfish? Mosquitoes? Let's not get hung up on working out these difficult questions about comparative physiology. I take it that we can all agree that there are at least some non-human organisms that do not feel pleasure and pain at all. Trees, for instance. So whether such organisms live or die makes no difference to the utility enjoyed by such organisms. Taking the life of a tree is not the sort of thing that would concern a utilitarian particularly, except insofar as it impacts on the pleasure or pain experienced by other creatures. Now consider the life of an organism that does feel pleasure and pain. What would a hedonistic utilitarian say about taking the life of such an organism? An obviously tempting answer is to say it would be wrong to take the life of such an organism because that would lead to a loss of utility. The organism will miss out on various pleasurable experiences that it could have had by dying sooner rather than later. But this answer is actually a little hasty. We have just made an assumption that may not be justified. We've assumed that the organism would enjoy net positive utility for the remainder of its life if it did not die now. But this is not guaranteed. What do I mean by net positive utility? I mean that taking all the experiences the animal will have in the rest of its life, some of them will make positive contributions to utility. These will be the pleasurable ones. Others will have neutral or zero contributions to utility, for instance, when the animal is unconscious or asleep. And yet others will make negative contributions, for instance, when the animal is in pain or distress. And a good way of thinking about this is it's the sort of state where you might think it'd be better for the animal to be unconscious instead. Hedonistic utilitarians typically assume that it is in some fashion possible to aggregate these positive, neutral, and negative experiences to arrive at an overall contribution to utility for a given period of time. One way to imagine this aggregation happening is by simply adding utility scores assigned to each time that the animal is alive. When it is unconscious, it gets a 0. When it is in a state that is more pleasurable than painful, it gets a positive score. When in a state that is more painful than pleasurable, it gets a negative score. So the answer for a hedonistic utilitarian turns crucially on what lies ahead for an animal. If it is a net negative in future, then overall utility will be maximised by killing the animal. If it is net positive, then utility will be maximised by keeping the animal alive. Of course, we never know exactly what the future holds, so it's not a simple case of comparing two scenarios and seeing which holds more utility. Instead, we'll have to weigh up the various possible ways the future would go and weight them for how likely or unlikely we think they are, and so forth. Okay, what about preference utilitarianism?